Welcome to Promo Insiders, an ASI media podcast that covers the topics that matter most to the promotional products industry. I'm CJ Mitica, editor-in-chief of ASI Media, and today we're celebrating Christmas in July. No, it's not Prime Day, but rather the Counselor State of the Industry. I'm joined by Nate Kuzma, ASI Senior Executive Director of Research and Corporate Marketing, and Sarah Lavandusky, Executive Editor of Digital Content, to discuss the biggest trends and most surprising findings in our annual report. So before we start, Sarah, I have to confess, I brought you on because I needed a buffer. I've been doing a lot of podcasts with Nate, and we've been spending a lot of intimate time together, and it's too much. I needed a third party, so
Way too much.
thanks.
I'm
Way
here for
too
you.
much.
I'm here. I'm here for you.
No, we're actually, we're talking about state of the industry. We just released our print issue. Is coming out in the middle of July. In fact, you could have found it at the ASI show in Chicago. We're recording this actually before the show because Nate will be in Chicago and giving actually a keynote speech, Nate, right, about this very content.
An inaugural keynote performance by me, but definitely not my first time. I'm talking about the SOI.
Well, first and last keynote. So thank you, Nate, for that one. No, as always, our state of the industry is always our biggest issue of the year, our biggest package of content. It's the info that's most looked forward to by the promotional products industry, and there's just a wealth of information and data, and you can find it right now as this podcast is released it'll be on our website, statedindustry.com is the URL you can find it at. We'll be promoting it all over social media and all sorts of different places. So it will be impossible to miss. But as part of as part of the content, as part of the package, part of the issue, we like doing this podcast as a supplement, as a way to sort of dive more into some of these topics that we cover in that issue. And so we're going to talk about some of those things here. But really, to start off with, I wanted to take a broad overall look. And Nate, we'll start with you, since you are the person who handles the surveys, the research. What stood out to you in particular with this year's State of the Industry survey?
Yeah, I mean, when we did it in 2020, that was, we released it in 2021 and 2020's numbers. That was kind of a crazy year. I mean, that's going to be that's going to go down as literally one of the most insane years as far as data goes, right? That you can ever get.
The fact that I still had PTSD from the fact that we got the survey results in February, and then the world went to hell a month later.
Yeah, and then we had to get more survey. It was
yes.
It was insane. I have PTSD from a lot about that year, but not the least about this report. Really, what it came to me was not only how resilient the industry was, but how quickly it bounced back, and how quickly it kind of bounced back. I don't want to say to normal, but it regained a lot of the footing that it had lost in terms of what products were hot, what markets were hot. A lot of what we had seen in the past, pre-COVID, right, rebounded and it started to show its strengths this year. So, a lot changed in 21. Obviously, there were a lot of different challenges than we had seen even during COVID. And certainly that we had not experienced before COVID hit in March of 20. So it's really just how quickly things are sort of snapped back. 2022 is going to be interesting for sure. Like, I have no idea what to expect, actually. But I think my key takeaway from 21 was just because things changed so dramatically during COVID doesn't mean that they were going to stay that way.
Sarah, what about you? Looking at the 2021 results that we're just publishing, and then knowing sort of where we are in 2022 currently, where do you see the industry and the distributors that you've been talking to in the course of your reporting?
Yeah, I mean, like Nate was saying, 2021 brought a slew of challenges that we hadn't really expected, that were different from the COVID challenges of no business. I think now what we're seeing is business is coming, it's booming back. Like, people are really enthusiastic about being on the other side of COVID and starting to buy again, and they're excited about that. The problem is that now the supply chain can't keep up, and that's a big problem. That's keeping sales damped down, and that's posing a challenge to distributors and suppliers who really want to get back to business. and they're ready to go. They have buyers who are ready to go, and they just can't get the sales done in the time that we're used to as an industry. They just can't get stuff out the door quick enough to meet client demand, and it's just the supply chain is not keeping up. um, I did hear from distributors recently that, things are improving slowly, incrementally. They are improving. I'm hoping that that continues through the rest of this year, but they're also ready for another big slowdown if that happens. They're a little bit nervous about that. But yeah, it's just a slew of challenges in the supply chain that we hadn't really been anticipating, I think, and that's keeping numbers down still.
Yeah, that ties into the theme that we sort of presented the SOI issue with, this idea that there's a lot of optimism, a lot of encouraging signs with sales and orders and what distributors are seeing with business, but it comes with a healthy dose of challenges, many of which we're going to talk about, from order errors and delays to staffing issues. Supply chain obviously is still very big, and so there's just a lot of headwinds that they're confronting right now. It doesn't mean we're not going to get back to that recovery, back to those 2019 levels, and we can talk about that. It's just going to take some extra work to get there for sure. So we're going to dive into some of the data here. These are findings that are in our, again, the print issue of Counselor, which is out now, and it's also going to be available online. You can find it online on our website. All this data is available, and so even as we talk through this, you can find the articles to look at and spend some time sort of examining and unpack what they mean. The first thing I want to do is this sort of sales snapshot about where from our findings things were in 19, 20, and 21. And across the board, I think there's a very defined trend going on. So for our audio listeners here, we a few sales metrics. Median number of orders, 350 in 2019, 300 in 2020, 321 in 2021. So again, not at 2019 levels, but better than 2020. Profit margin, 36% in 2019, 33% in 2020, 34.8% in 2021. Average values of orders, same things, from nearly 1,250 to 931, back to $1,050. That's the average value of orders. And median number of clients served, same thing, 75 clients in 2019, 60 in 2020, 65 in 2021. So all those metrics, I mean, it's a pretty clear trend where things were at a noticeable peak in 2019 and dropped in 2020, and then in 2021, sort of that middle ground. So Nate, like when you looked at the data, like does this match your expectations about what you expected with 2021?
I had no idea what to expect, but like it made sense, right? So when you actually start thinking about it, the economy rebounded, and there were still challenges for sure, right? In 21, without a doubt. I mean, vaccines, if we, it seems like vaccines have been out for so long and, everything started to open up again. They didn't come back until they were not released until January of 21. And most, it didn't hit one sort of like large scale distribution until deeper into the year. So like 21 was still met with a lot of challenges in terms of opening. So it's not surprising that it didn't bounce back all the way, right? But again, there were no major shutdowns. 20, there were 5 months where nothing happened. Literally, the only thing that our industry was selling was PPE. So the fact that it rebounded but not fully, that makes sense to me. Looking forward though to 22, the demand is there, but the products aren't necessarily always there, but the prices are going to be higher. So, that's where the 22 metrics looking forward again, a few months out, it's going to be fascinating.
Sarah, you just wrote an article very recently about what distributors are seeing amid this talk of a recession, and is that impacting sales? So I think you already mentioned this a little bit, but what were your findings in talking to these distributors about where things were, where things are now, and what they're expecting for perhaps the rest of the year?
Yeah, they so across the board pretty much, and this is top 40, this is, one person businesses. they're saying that clients are clamoring for product, and usually they see in the summertime, they usually see a slowdown in demand because people are on vacation or whatever, and then Labor Day hits and that's when they start to order for the fall and then the Q4 gifting. This year they said the summer has not slowed down with demand. They have had to try as best they can with the staffing challenges to ramp up to make sure that they can meet that demand. Clients are, they know that there's these, I mean, you can't not know that the economy is not looking good right now. I mean, the inflation number just came out yesterday, 9.1% in June, which is like a 40-year high. Not good. Same in Canada, they're at a 30 or 40-year high in inflation. Everything costs more, so people are aware of that, and yet what I've heard is that customers have not pulled back yet in terms of their enthusiasm to buy promo, which is great for us. However, the issue again is that the supply chain has been very slow to keep up with that demand. So they're seeing gradual improvement, but I know that T-shirts, for example, pose a real challenge for finding inventory. So you have to go to multiple suppliers to get a specific shirt, and then each supplier is out of all mediums in that style, and that really puts a damper on the promotion that the client had hoped to get, and you have to keep managing those client expectations, which is it gets tiring. There's a certain burnout that comes with that, and having to come back to clients and deliver bad news. So the rest of the year they are, fingers crossed, they're hoping that things continue to improve, so they're looking ahead and they're pretty optimistic about the supply chain. But, and I think this came out in our data too, that most are expecting the supply chain to not see real improvement until next year. And I think that's probably safe to say at this point, but they are optimistic about the coming months and the supply chain to be able to gradually keep up with that client demand that they're still seeing.
So, in relation to that, with supply chain issues where sales are, there's some pretty interesting data that we got from looking at order errors and delays. So the percentage of on-time orders from suppliers has been dropping every year since 2017. In 2017, it was 93%. Last year, 2021, it was 83%. And same with errors. So in 2018, the percentage of orders that were delivered without any errors from suppliers was at 89%. In 2021, it was 84%. Now, you could look at those numbers and think, well, that's still 4 and 5 orders that are arriving on time and without any problems. What's the big deal? But Sarah, I mean, you reported on this for our SOI issue. It is a big deal, and definitely with distributors. Why is this causing so much concern and angst and headaches?
Yeah, it's these are interesting conversations I had with distributors. And I think, distributors generally are, what I found was that they're generally understanding about the challenges that suppliers are facing. We're going to talk about this, but particularly the staffing challenges that they have. There just aren't enough hands to unload containers, to, warehouse things, to pick and pack, to imprint, all that stuff. There just aren't enough people, and there aren't enough people in customer service to answer calls quickly and answer emails quickly. So what they're seeing is that they're generally understanding about those challenges, but I think they're still frustrated that they're not getting quicker answers from suppliers. They're not, sometimes the mistake is then the onus is put on the distributor, when before the supplier may have taken more ownership of it. So what they're seeing, especially last year, they were seeing a lot of late orders from suppliers, and it was, it would be from the supplier themselves. It could have been from the courier company. Sometimes the supplier would get their items out on time, and then stuff would just sit in a FedEx distribution center somewhere for days, and that would make the product late even though the supplier was on time. So distributors are just frustrated about the general lack of not only the staff, but then the lack of what they said is the ownership that suppliers used to maybe take for orders that they haven't been taking, and the onus has been put on the distributor to kind of, then pay restocking fees if not everything arrives on time for an event, and then it's like, there's no point even doing this promotion. So then they're returning items and they're having to pay restocking fees out of their own pocket. So it's a real concern when we're in such a time sensitive industry and so deadline driven, and items are not arriving at events on time. Like that really is a thorn in our industry side, and it's not sustainable. And distributors just expressed a lot of frustration about where we are right now in terms of the supply chain, and then suppliers, how they've been handling things.
Well, so on that note, Sarah, is it all on suppliers? Like, are they primarily, are they all to blame in this, or is there blame to be spread around for this issue?
Right. So I talked to suppliers too, and they said, look, we are really challenged with the staffing, and it takes a long time to onboard people, especially in warehousing and production and customer service. It is a complex industry. It's not an overnight onboarding process. So it used to be that distributors would kind of, submit their PO, and the distributor would, or the supplier would take care of it. Things have changed, and distributors have to babysit their orders a little more. Suppliers think, some of them said, that's actually a good thing, that distributors are taking a little bit more ownership of their order once it gets to us. It's not just dropping it in our lap and walking away. There's been we have had this issue for a long time, incomplete POs. That's been a big issue. They have to keep going back to the distributor asking for more information. So suppliers say, look, it does require a little bit more babysitting on both of our ends, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, to take more ownership of each order. But I think for a long time, suppliers have been so used to distributors kind of, putting it in their laps, and distributors have been used to not having to babysit their orders. And so they've kind of adjusted to that. And now they're having to adjust back to a more hands-on approach. And that's been a bit of a challenge this past year.
Yeah, for sure. And Nate, you've been very generous in sharing your data wisdom with me throughout the years, especially when I'm looking for trends that aren't really there. But you've always told me that at least 3 years to define a trend. So when you look at this data, we're going on 4 or 5 years now where it's been consistent declines year after year. What do we make of that?
You make of it, it's an endemic problem, right? I mean, we can put blame on the current, hiring and, situations that were, exacerbated by COVID, right? As part of the problem. But let's be clear about this, that this is not something that all of a sudden everything was unicorns and rainbows and then things all of a sudden fell off a cliff, right? Because that's not actually what happened. Things have been trending this direction. And what happened was you had a certain catalyst that came up, which caused everything to just sort of accelerate. And this time they were accelerate kind of in a downward momentum for some of these, especially when you look at things like, on-time orders from suppliers, or, order accuracy. And what's really interesting here is that those numbers, those percentages are going down in a negative direction, while other metrics, such as percentage of orders that have a 5-day turnaround time, right, or average order length, have actually gone in the opposite direction. Now people are saying, I don't need as many orders in 5 days, right? We don't need that rush job. Orders don't need to be done in an average of 10 days. Now they can take 12, 13, 14 days. So you would expect, as those numbers have sort of moderated to be more quote unquote reasonable, the other numbers might have gone in a more positive direction, but that's not what happened. It's an inverse relationship, and it's damn peculiar.
Yeah, so you brought it up. Let's talk about it now. Those statistics, percentage of orders requiring 5 days or less turnaround. This is what distributors reported. In 2019, it was 37%, so more than 1/3 of all orders. In 2021, 21%. So that's 1 in 5 orders now with a 5-day or less turnaround. So that's a big drop. Average order turnaround times, and this is what suppliers reported. So in 2019, it was, oops, I went too far. There we go. 10 days for suppliers. 2020, 12 days. In 2021, 13 days. So there's been a definite shift in the pace of that orders are being fulfilled. My question to both of you is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? What do we make of this?
I think it's okay. So I think that the fact that it's no longer as much of a rush industry as, like, what is was it just in time JIT industry as it used to be? I think as that's sort of mitigating itself, right? And people are maybe planning ahead or realizing that it can't be done tomorrow, which is anti what we think about in our day-to-day lives anymore, right? That's actually a great thing. What's not a great thing, though, is that I don't know if it's all based on lack of staffing or training, or if there's a little bit of a, maybe a little bit of complacency that's coming in, like, I don't know about you, but when I'm up against a really tight deadline, I am laser focused. I mean, laser focused.
Yeah.
But if I know I got something and I can do it anytime between now and the next 2 weeks, odds are I ain't getting to it now. And I wonder if there's also some of that psychological component as well, saying we don't need to be as hyper focused as we have been in the past. And it's I don't exactly know how you go about proving that, but it's definitely a hypothesis I have for this because it's hard to make a lot of sense of it.
Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as when I was reporting on this, it was the same thing. It was like, well, when I showed them this data, and it was the same thing. It was like, that's, the only thing we can only speculate what this is showing us. At least for, I mean, in 2020, I think, there was just so many COVID challenges that were precluding companies from being able to fulfill orders at all. So I think that may show us why it dropped from 2019. But I think in 2021, distributors, they were saying, we're seeing more from our clients. We're seeing them actually heed us when we say you have to order early. We don't know if you're going to be able to get this if you don't order early because of the supply chain. That may indicate the lower number. That may be indicative of that. So I think it does have to do with educating customers more and them actually heeding distributors who, frankly, would like this to not be a just-in-time industry. Companies want people to put more thought into their promo products. Like one of the distributors I talked to said, is it really a great idea to have an idea for tote bags on Monday and get them by Friday? Like that's not really what this should be about. It should be about marketing. It shouldn't be about just slapping a brand on something. It should be about a marketing campaign, the ideation that goes into that. There should be thought put into it. So it's actually a good thing that there are fewer rush orders. And then it looks like the same for suppliers. It looks like distributors are coming to them a little bit more ahead of time instead of rushing the orders through with their end clients, because the end clients know that if they don't order now, they're not going to get it in time. But the question that I'm still kind of, the thing that I found interesting about this was 2021 was so uncertain, and we didn't know, like, an event may, was like not going to happen, and then, oh, it is going to happen. And so I thought maybe there would have been, because of that uncertainty, there would have been actually maybe not at 2019 levels, but maybe around the same as 2020, a little bit higher. There would have been more rush orders because people were then putting on events kind of at the last minute when they thought they wouldn't have to, or wouldn't be able to, I should say. But it looks like that perhaps end buyers are ordering a little earlier than they would have before because of supply chain challenges.
You both make good points. It's like with the state of the industry issue. It's not like a month before, Nate. We're like, hey, we got this. We got to get going. Let's go. Get the surveys out. We got to turn this around quick. We're doing this, months in advance. It's a huge process, and so it makes sense that with client orders that he practicing that same sort of foresight, long-term planning, that makes a lot of sense. But the thing that I'm wondering about, and I think both you probably agree, is that it's easy to convince clients now when there is no recourse, when the alternative is, hey, you either order 6 months in advance or you don't get your product, you don't get any product. But if the supply chain does right itself to some degree, and then there's not the same dire consequences, I think it's gonna be harder to convince clients to exercise that same sort of pragmatic planning when they don't have to, that they still will be able to get their products in that just-in-time fashion.
Maybe. And the only reason I say that is there's a reason that they're called trends, right?
Sure.
So sometimes trends are hard to reverse, which is why for so many years we saw the increase in faster turnaround times being required, right? Like we saw the percentage of orders that required 5-day turnaround times increase year after year after year after year. And then all of a sudden it stopped. And you had this thing that happened, which was called COVID, which caused those things to stop. So now people are going to become may be more accustomed to having to plan a little bit ahead. It's kind of weird. It's a weird psychological dynamic how that can happen, but trends don't normally bounce around. So when you see a multi-year trend, there's going to be a period of leveling off before it normally rebounds sharply. And I think you may see that happen here.
That would be interesting. That would be great. I still find it hard to believe where people can separate it from the fact that Amazon can still deliver things in next day, right? Amazon Prime. So to keep that dichotomy between that, I can get everything else right now, but I'm not going to get my promo right away. Like I find it hard for people to keep making that distinction.
Yeah, get it.
So it'll be interesting to see. This is a fascinating time in our industry, especially the way things are working. So it'll be interesting to see how this shapes up. We talked about staffing a lot already, and so now I want to dive into that because it really is looming over a lot of what's affecting our industry and plaguing our industry right now. And this is very interesting. So we surveyed both distributors and suppliers about their staffing, asking many of the same questions about, did you raise wages to attract employees or keep them? How long take you to fill positions? What about turnover? What are your concerns about finding and keeping workers? And across the board, suppliers are way higher than distributors, and not just a little bit, double, triple in some cases. So I'll open up to both of you. Why is that the case?
Different business models, right? Like that's really what it is. I think that's the biggest thing. It's, a lot, if you think about like for new employees on distributor sides, right? If they're back office, that's one thing. You might have to raise wages for them. But if they're salespeople, odds are, yeah, you might have to play with the commission structure a little bit here or there, but it's going to be a little bit different. And you can keep some of them probably the same, especially depending on what model they're in, if they're on commission only or commission plus bonus or what have you. Suppliers, on the other hand, you're dealing with people who have to be, obviously they can be back office, they can be doing the things like the marketing and such, but there's not quite as much movement around them. But if you're talking about, jobs that are like going to be IT focused or jobs that are production line focused, where there are not, especially when you talk about the people who are really making the products, right? Who are the ones who are making, who are shipping, who are packaging the products. There's not that level of workforce that's still out there. So you have to compete with other companies now much more ferociously than you have had in the past to do. So yeah, and the only way you're going to do that really is by wages and benefits. So I think that's really what you're seeing with suppliers.
Sarah, what did you hear from the suppliers that you talked to in the course of your reporting for State of the Industry?
Yeah, they said, yeah, there's not a supplier who's not challenged with this. And it's for those very reasons. I mean, it's mostly where they're talking about is customer service, but also production, warehousing, those people who need to have physical hands, actually, picking and touching product. They have to be trained on machinery. They have to be trained on imprinting. They have to unload containers. They have to pick and pack. They have to be on the site pretty much 5 days a week when other people are able to work from home. It's a lot of contract work sometimes. So there's hourly wages. It's all the things that right now, with the changing nature of work, are not as desirable as some other jobs. And so that is really, it's like Nate said, there's a huge competition for people in that space who have the ability to work those kinds of machines, to be on the ground, day in and day out. Especially, I think with, in 2021, we still were so concerned about workplace cleanliness and distancing and safety. And so people were like, they didn't feel like they were so comfortable with having to be on site amongst other people 5 days a week. So those jobs are just harder to not only find talent for and fill, but then keep employees working in them. And actually, after having trained them on the machinery and the process, actually keep them there working for the company was really challenging. And then now there's the trend of, people will take a job and then just never show up on the first day and you never hear from them again. They're basically ghosting their employer. So that's been, that's another challenge right now. So yeah, it's suppliers across the board are experiencing this very thing. There's no one immune to this.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on that a little bit, also, like, what used to be a well-paid or a quote unquote well-paying job, right, is no longer. Everything, if prices, if the CPI is going up by 9% year over year, as just happened, as Sarah mentioned yesterday. Well, unless you're now fighting for that extra 10% in your salary, or more, by the way, to cover everything, you're now making less than you were last year. So we may think you have to raise wages, and that's unfair to the employer, yada yada yada, right? Here's the thing: if the employer is raising their prices, it has to be passed down. It's not going all towards the running of the company or management, and that's sort of what we're seeing here. I mean, starting salaries at a department store like Kohl's right now are $15, $16, $17 an hour up here in New Jersey. And there are manufacturing companies that are in promotional products in New Jersey. So, those jobs may not have even paid $17, $18 an hour pre-pandemic, right? Now, you have to raise your wages above that because it is much more skilled labor than other jobs that may be paying more right now.
I've seen the signs on the road, $20 an hour starting salary, but sign-on bonuses. And if I didn't enjoy working so much with both of you, I mean, I would have left already for something better paying. But it's my coworkers that keep me here, and the industry and the free samples too. Let's not kid ourselves. But on the subject of prices, that's a huge concern right now with suppliers. Not distributors are raising their wages too, for sure, but suppliers are feeling that much more distinctly, and that played out with when we asked them about that. How challenging is it to set prices due to labor costs? So 95% thought it was challenging in some form, and a third labeled it as very challenging. So to your point, Nate, you have all these workers you're trying to either attract or keep. You have to pay them more. You have these supply chain costs and pressures add on top of that. And this is making it very difficult for suppliers to run their business.
There used to be a time not long ago in our industry when suppliers would print catalogs in December, and those prices would be good for the entirety of the year, which seems ludicrous right now, right? Those days are long gone. I mean, to get a number that says like 95% are saying it's tough it's challenging to set prices due to labor costs, it might as well be 1,000%, right? It's everybody. There's no exception there, and the other 5% maybe click the wrong button. I mean, it's really a staggering percentage because nothing's ever 95% when you're actually doing market research. You could say, what color is the sky? You would get 10% of people saying, well, it's not really blue. That's the refractive, yada, yada, yada. And you have that. So it's a big problem. And honestly, it's not a problem that is going to be going away anytime soon. What's interesting about it, though, is the promotional products market used to react highly negative if the price of a pen went up by 5 cents. And distributors and end buyers would recoil from that, raise holy hell, and then move to a different supplier. The market now is much more like everybody else. It's willing to absorb more of this and understand it, which is something that I don't know that I ever thought I would say.
So we surveyed we surveyed distributors to find out who are the most reliable suppliers, and we got a bunch of names. We included many of them in our State of the Industry package. And Sarah, you did the reporting on that, and you talked to these suppliers to find out what they're doing right and how are they combating these staff challenges, or how are they sort of overcoming them. So what did you hear? How did suppliers circumvent a lot of these issues, and what are they doing to sort of mitigate their staffing challenges?
Yeah, I found a few common themes among the suppliers I talked to. So we did some research. We looked at highly rated suppliers. We had Nate help us out, and we had distributors basically rate them on how they've done through the challenges of 2021. And what I found were the common themes, like, they're very proactive about inventory. They look ahead to the challenges, the split orders, They look ahead to, having several distribution centers and making sure the inventory is pretty much evenly distributed across the center so that not, a client in New Jersey isn't at a disadvantage to somebody in the Southwest, say. Like they're really trying to be proactive about inventory. They're forward booking containers. They are really serious about training their people. Like they take that very seriously. They have, very detailed, in-depth training. They don't just throw them onto the job the first day. They're also very they defend their people. Like they don't appreciate when their customer service reps get berated for challenges that really, are not their fault. When it's inventory or slow containers, or it's a courier company that made something late or whatever, they really do back up their customer service reps. They're also they try to be as communicative as possible with distributors at every step of the way. It does add touch points when you have to babysit your order, but suppliers, I think they're also empathetic with their distributors because they know, like, look, the end client has to be kept happy, so they keep coming back to the distributor, so the distributor keeps coming back to us, frankly. So that relationship, has to be healthy, and we have to do what we can to make sure that that's healthy. So they're empathetic with distributors who are coming to them frustrated because they know there's an end buyer on the other side who's also frustrated. So they try to take that in consideration as well, that they also have to be empathetic with their distributor clients. They're also invested in technology, and I think that's one of the things that we've been seeing in the industry in recent years is a move to automation and
Sure.
having to have fewer hands, physical hands that are taking care of these touch points. But now it's really for suppliers to look at automation, automated emails, letting people know where their order is in the process so that distributors don't have to keep calling and emailing and bogging down those communication lines. They have automated emails that tell them exactly where their order is. If there is an issue, they have automated emails. So things like that I think, have pushed the industry over into more technology so they're not so reliant on filling all these jobs with physical people.
It's an interesting duality where the automation is allowing these companies to be more hands-off, but and I'm not saying this was a hands-off industry before the past couple of years. It's certainly not the case, but it's it re-emphasized the fact that both distributors and suppliers need to be very on top of things. Like you can't just wait and hope for the other party to do their job. You have to be invested in all parts of the order to ensure its success.
Yeah, you have to be your own advocate. You really do.
Yeah, and that's making things not easy. And we've heard, you certainly heard, Sarah, from a lot of distributors who are frustrated with how things are right now in terms of that order oversight. But it's really just the sort of the cost of doing business right now. Would you agree?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think, yeah, it's been a bit of an adjustment to, it was a little bit more hands off, but it's been an adjustment to have to start, really being very detail oriented, have a real clear eye about when you're putting in orders to a supplier and really knowing what they're communicating back to you and not just saying, sure, sure, push it through because you're in a rush. It is the cost of doing business now. And that sometimes for a lot of distributors, especially when they're small, that means sacrificing on prospecting and selling because they have to really be babysitting their orders a lot of the time. And that's the reality right now for sure.
Definitely a topic we're going to be talking about next few years in terms of how distributors run their business. So I'm sure we'll be diving into this often because it's really an inflection point for many companies in the industry. So we're going to move on to products and markets. These are our big ticket items. These are the data that everybody looks forward to perusing for our annual report. So looking at the products here, Nate, I mean, this must be exciting to you. This looks refreshingly normal. Would you agree?
Well, it was nice not to figure out what the percentage of unimprinted blank face masks were relative to the market penetration of printed face masking, what the profit margins were on each, and all of the other chaos that ensued in 2020. So yeah, having the top 5 being t-shirts, drinkware, polos, caps, and bags. Yeah, no, that was kind of refreshing to see. Did I anticipate that? Kinda, maybe, but maybe not in that necessary order. But it's not overly surprising. I mean, even last year, t-shirts was the singular number one item, right?
Right.
So it's always big. So even though I know that there's certainly supply chain issues out there regarding getting t-shirts, they're still getting into the market. I mean, t-shirts accounted for well north of $3 billion in sales last year. It's a lot. That's a lot of one item that's going out there, and there's a lot of variety. So yeah, no, it was certainly refreshing. And what you see though, once you get beyond those top five, is it really drops off. But apparel is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger in our industry every year. Putting aside 2020, right? And I guess you could theoretically include face masks as apparel, but I won't, because I just won't. Apparel, makes up, three of the top five products. The t-shirts, polo shirts, and headwear. It's really predominant. And considering that there's, I think one of the issues that you see here is that the supply chain issues are hitting obviously everywhere, but especially coming out of China. And it's not that China does not make a large amount of apparel, because they certainly do, but there are also other areas of the world where you can source apparel from. I think that is also maybe helping out some of those categories.
Yeah, that's a good point. There, a lot of apparel sourcing comes from Central America, which is much closer. That helps ease the sourcing pressures that people are feeling. The chart with all the data, there's some small numbers there that may be hard to read. You can again find this in our print issue of Council of State Industry and online. You definitely want to take some time to look at it in detail, because there's a lot of numbers there. But you brought up apparel, Nate. So this is very, very interesting. The combined apparel market share, and this includes caps and headwear, in 2019 it was 42.5%. In 2020 it dropped to 32.7%. And again, that's a very vivid reflection of the rise of PPE and the lack of events. Well, in 2021, apparel went back up to 43.2%. So that's even higher than the numbers in 2019. And so apparel is doing better than it's ever done right now. So exactly like you said, Nate. I mean, apparel just keeps getting stronger.
It does. It is. And hard goods, as we refer to them in our industry, anything other than apparel, right? That's they were bolstered last year by the PPE type items, right? But man, they have been hit especially hard by supply chain, and that's evident in the numbers.
Sarah, you're working on our gift guide right now for our fall issue of Counselor. What are you hearing about the types of products that people want? Is it apparel hard goods split, or is it more a difference of the value of the products, the maybe higher end products versus the lower end giveaways that were often the lifeblood of the industries for so many years?
It sounds like from what I've heard, it sounds like it's still going to be this year high-end items, stuff that is nice to be it's nice to be kitted and sent to individual homes. And so if you're going to spend, this year especially, a lot of money to ship your items, you're not going to ship something cheap. You're going to probably you may have a smaller gift order size of something, but you'll send a nicer item, because it's going to, like, you're not going to spend $30 to ship a $5 item. You're going to spend more money on the item, and it's going to be $30 ship, but you're going to have a nice item in that box for the recipient. So it sounds like high-end food. Food is always that's a perennial favorite for people in Q4. High-end food, high-end tech products, speakers, brand name items, sustainable items, eco-friendly. Those are all going to be trending this year. But I think there's still going to be, even with those economic headwinds we're talking about, I think people really do still see the ROI in sending high-end items as gifts.
Nate, you did talk about, obviously, trends and how things happen over multiple years and cause this permanent shift. And maybe, and Sarah, maybe you'll agree with this. Maybe we're seeing that with products where not to say that like this industry was always the trinkets and trash, right? It's been better than that, but for years, like so many times for events and for giveaways, a lot of buyers just instantly gravitated to what can I get the most product for my budget, and so they would choose a cheaper, more value priced item that probably wasn't, that didn't compare to some of the better brand name offerings or the better higher end offerings in this industry. So I wonder with COVID, with the shift to higher end product, that may have buyers recalibrated their expectations, and that even if they're going not for that top line item, they're not going for whatever the cheapest thing that's available. They're conditioned now to buy something nicer because that's what their clients and what the end users are giving way to are expecting.
Maybe, right? I mean, that's my answer. My answer is maybe, and I'm only stating that because we haven't had multiple year trends of this yet, so I don't know that to be true yet. And also, those cheaper priced products are also going to rise in price as well.
True.
So right now, in some cases, you may not be able to get those products anyway in time for whatever you may need. So I think, and I hate to do this, like, well, when this does this or when this does that, we always do that in our industry, and after this, whatever random point we pick is. But what I think is going to be very curious to see is when the supply chain gets back to normal and you can source a product directly from China and it can be here in 8 weeks, right? Because right now that's probably not over. That's optimistic, right? But let's just say you have a big event, you need 20,000 of these items. You can get them in 8 weeks, guaranteed, pretty much, right? Will that hold true? Will you now get 3,000 of the more expensive ones, or are you going to gravitate get the 20,000 of the less expensive ones? I don't know yet. I think that sort of chapter still has yet to be written.
Sarah, to wrap up, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's hard to predict. I think it would be nice to think that people will gravitate towards the higher end items. But like you said, I do think that once the supply chain evens out and the cheaper items are easier to get, I do think that we're going to see a bit of a resurgence of those. So I think you're going to see more large scale events where you're going to have these cheaper items that are, 1,000 at a time or a few thousand at a time. They're meant as giveaways. You're not going for the retail brand as a giveaway at an event, in those
Sure.
bags, you're going for the cheaper items. So as events come back even more and they're bigger, I think we will see a resurgence in the cheaper hard goods.
Okay, it'll be interesting to see, like so many things, where in these unprecedented times where are things going to revert to where they were, or are they going to go on a completely different path? So it'll be interesting to see. For our last thing we want to cover as far as the data is concerned, we want to talk about markets. So again, this is another highly sought after bit of data that we offer, and looking at the data from 2021. So the biggest news, I'd say, education, which had been #1 for years, but not in 2020. It was superseded by healthcare, bounced back. So education became #1 again. And to round out the top 5, it was healthcare at #2, manufacturing at #3, construction at #4, and retail at #5. Nate, start with you. What jumped out at you when you looked at the market data?
So almost like what's not in the top 5, right? We had some, pre-COVID, same, I'm gonna get sick of saying that, but whatever. I don't have to say it for much longer. There were some categories, some industries that were very, very strong consistently, right? One was finance. That was always one of the leading industries, not #1 or 2, right? #1 and #2 has been education and healthcare for a better part of well over a decade, right? But you've seen sort of like a muddying once you get beyond the top 5 industries, but everything's kind of really close, right? Tech, took a little bit of a hit. Finance and insurance took a little bit of a hit. So what you're going to kind of notice here is that the top 2 are going to always be the same, but then there's going to be more movement. And, seeing things like, construction and manufacturing and retail in the top 5, where in some cases there may have been movement, and retail being #5, that's sort of exceptional right there. So I hate to say this, but it's really important to be diversified because there's going to be swings in these industries. Heavy swings. And what I think we saw last year was if you were heavily invested in education, right, you might have had a really bad year in 2020.
Yeah, it's always good advice. It's very interesting that which markets rebounded and which didn't. These were some interesting things that we saw. Hospitality, I would have bet that we would see a market bounce back from it in 2021. That wasn't the case. It actually fared even or very slightly worse. So I found that surprising. Did you find that surprising, Sarah or Nate?
No. No, I I think it's the staff shortages. I think people were like planning these big events, these big blowout trips for 2021 after COVID, and COVID fears. But I think honestly more because I've done a few articles and talked to people in the travel industry, not just
Yeah.
from promo, who are on the ground dealing with uh, vacation cancellations and rebookings and all that stuff. They know the ins and outs of all of the COVID policies everywhere, and they said it was less about people being scared of COVID, and it was more about the fact that you were not going to get a pre-COVID experience if you travel in 2021. You're not going to get that experience today in 2022 with the 6-hour lines at airports, with the delayed flights and cancellations, with you don't get your room clean at a hotel unless you were specially request it because they don't have enough staff. I mean, the lines to get in your hotel, the lines at restaurants, the lines at recreational facilities. I think people are just, again, and especially last year, they're really just waiting again to take these trips. And I think this year we're seeing the same thing. Hospitality cannot get a break. It's been a really rough time for them.
Yeah, and never mind the fact that if you think about the sales to hospitality, right? What were they for? Well, a lot of them were for employees,
Yep.
right? A lot of, and if they were not for employees, they were for guests. There's less employees now, right? A lot of hotels in major areas never really even reopened. Like brands like Marriott and Hilton, if they had 30 hotels in an area, don't assume that all 30 of those are still open because they probably aren't. Even in cities that have a large tourist population or business population like New York, all of those hotels that used to be open aren't there anymore. So you actually had a level of the business that isn't even applicable anymore as it was in February of 2020. So that's also what's sort of impacting that industry pretty heavily.
Well, I would be surprised if there isn't an improvement in 2022 from the numbers in 2020 and 2021. Right, is at 4.4% in 2020, 4.3% in 2021. I know corporate travel hasn't come all the way back, but leisure travel is, I mean, super hot right now, and everybody seems like they're traveling at least for vacation or for pleasure. So even though the hospitality industry still has its challenges for sure, I definitely think there are opportunities because there's a lot of travel happening.
Yeah.
So
I think driving and Airbnbs are really big right now. Honestly,
Yeah.
the Airbnbs, you're not, with anybody else. You don't have to deal with staff shortages. It's just you. People don't want to deal with airports. They're driving everywhere. That's
Yeah.
where people are, and they're going to like the national parks because it's spread out and beautiful, and they don't have to deal with, all of the staff shortages at all of the resorts. Like I think that's where the travel has shifted. I think it's not so much dependent on the hospitality industry right now. It's more DIY.
And that's a good point, Sarah. When we present this market data, it's the biggest picture, right? But within that, there are niches that are very viable and definitely worth targeting. And I think it's incumbent on the distributor to figure out what those niches are to find for sure. A couple other interesting data things with markets. Government sales. This is for the large distributors, over 5 million in sales revenue. Just dropped dramatically. It was 10.7% in 2020, 3.1% in 2021. I think PPE is a huge part of that, and of course other government spending as well. So that wasn't surprising to see. And then a positive sign, manufacturing. It was at 8% in 2019, and it was 5.3% in 2020, and then right back to 8.1% in 2021. Interesting that even with the supply chain issues, that which one would think would impact manufacturing the most, still had a very good year for promo sales.
No, it did. I mean, the government thing wasn't a shock, right? That is a one-time phenomenon. And if you were a distributor that was lucky enough to have those contacts, kudos to you. I'm sure you went on a very nice vacation when you were allowed to. Manufacturing, on the other hand, no, it had a strong, very, very strong bounce back. It is a vital part of our economy, is manufacturing. So, there's supply chain issues, but I've been on, a few podcasts and webinars with leaders in our industry, product is there. Product is there, and product is there beyond our. I mean, obviously, there's shortages. You hear shortages of baby formula, right? Which are crucial for people that need it. And there's shortages of other things. There were shortages of, toilet paper back during COVID. But like the thing is, overall, the amount of products that are coming into and being created and produced within our overall economy is gigantic. There is so much production, and that's one of the reasons that we have staff shortages, right? There's not enough workers to go around for everything that needs to be done. So that's what you're saying, but it's also coming across in these numbers in so much that it bounced back, and it bounced back sharply to where it was pre-2020.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast last week, and I'm going to mess up the number, but it was a New York Times podcast with a couple economists, and the one said that yes, there's these port delays and clogs, but the processing, it was like 30% more product than they were like a year ago or something like that. Something crazy. So yeah, I mean like I said, I think the market data is very valuable. Please take time, look it over, and you can sort of create a story about why it dropped or why it's worth targeting, and then do your due diligence to investigate it more and maybe find the opportunities within there. So just to wrap up, let's just talk about what are we expecting for the rest of the year? What are your expectations? And Nate, we'll start with you. What are your expectations for next year's edition of State of the Industry? What's the story it's going to tell about this year, 2022?
I think it'll continue to be the story of recovery, barring something dramatically bad happening. And I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that at least in the U.S. and I think that unlike other countries like China, we're accustomed to living with some level of COVID, right? I don't see the seemingly draconian measures, if you think back to March and April of 20, that we saw coming back. So I think that the overall appetite for that is gone, and you're going to continue to see growth. Honestly, from an actual revenue perspective, I think 22 is going to be a strong year. I think there's going to be less products that are going to be sold, but they're going to be sold at a significantly higher price point. We actually are right now looking at what Q2 sales were, and we'll have that out later on in the summer. But I really think it's, and let's be clear, there's also fewer distributors that may be in our industry by a percentage, right? Because there were people who retired. I think that's one of the things that happened, and one of the causes of the staff shortage. A lot of people retired who might have been on the verge. And I think you've seen that our industry is not immune to that by any means. So I think you're going to see overall, sales per distributor can continue to increase. And I think you're going to see, I hate to say it, I think you're going to see an overall increase in sales in 2022 when we're in, as you put it, Christmas in July, but I think you're going to. So I think you're going to see that. And as it relates to the SOI, I think you're going to see continued improvement in many of the measures from the lows that we experienced in 20.
Okay, great. Sarah, what do you think?
I agree. I think I think things are gradually improving. Incrementally, really glacially slow, but they are improving. But like Nate mentioned, we are going to see variable pricing. Like we're finally getting to variable pricing in the promo industry. We're a little behind on that, but we're going to see products cost more because of increased cost across the board with staffing and raw materials and the freight it takes to get here and all of that. It's going to increase costs and products. So we may see smaller orders, but the items in the order will be at a higher price point. So I do think that right now people are optimistic generally. They are looking forward to the second half of the year. They're already working on Q4, which is like unheard of. They're saying we've never worked this far ahead for Q3 and Q4, which is fantastic. I love that for promo. I am all about that. So I do think that the optimism is real. I think, like Nate said, barring a huge drop in the economy, it's going to keep moving forward. Barring like draconian COVID restrictions again, it's going to keep moving forward. And I'm just really, really hoping that in 2023 we will see a huge improvement in the supply chain and more staff on the ground, helping suppliers get these orders out the door.
Great. to sum up, and something that I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, it's not a case of things are just great or things are just bad. It's a very complicated time, especially with the economy, especially with running a business. So there are so many encouraging things that I think people can really be hopeful about. But there's also these real challenges to deal with. And so balancing the two, figuring out how to get where you want to go while dealing with them, that's not going to be easy. Again, we're going to be here to help a counselor and ASI, because we're trying to unpack these trends and just show you what's important and how you can help navigate them. And so for our State of the Industry package, again, you can find it. It's going to be on our website right now. It's out already in print. Stateoftheindustry.com is the URL if you wanted to find it. And there'll be, again, plenty of information about different trends, lots of data. We have several infographics. We also have our top 40 rankings of the top 40 suppliers and distributors in the industry, and also our Counselor Award profiles of Person of the Year, International Person of the Year, Entrepreneurs of the Year, and so on. So a ton of great stuff to read, and awesome work again from our entire staff, including Sarah and Nate. So thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks, CJ.
Can't wait to see you again, Siege.
Hopefully it will not be in another 4 weeks, Nate, for a podcast. Maybe we can push it off a few months. Would that be okay with you?
Post Labor Day.
All right, let's book it. Not before our fantasy football draft. Is that a good deal?
Let's do it. I agree. Let's do it. In person
Awesome.
this year, by the way, in person.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. Well, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and have a great rest of your day.